Shedeur Sanders tops the list of players with the most to gain from tonight's preseason game. Who else makes the list? Find out next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. I've got 4 players not named Shedeur Sanders with the most to gain from tonight's preseason opener against the Panthers. Also, some key things to watch for tonight that I'll certainly have my eyes on, and a new development in the Quinshon Judkins legal situation. We'll talk about all those things and more. I do want to thank you for being on every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcast, and of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And I have already talked about how Shedeur Sanders has the most to gain from tonight's preseason game. I mentioned it earlier in the week, so I'm conceding the number one spot on this top 5 list I've compiled to Shedeur. He obviously has the most to gain in terms of just that respect factor of trying to maybe finally get those first team reps and whatnot. And so I think we can get that. We can knock that one out of the way now without going into too much more detail, because I've talked about that at length already this week. But there are some other players that I think have a lot to gain from tonight's matchup and putting something out there on tape in a game setting, because I think this is one of the most important things. Like, there's an element to a preseason game that can't be replicated at practice. And it does kind of fall in line with what I've talked about this week with Shedeur. Like, it's that gamer factor, right? Like, sometimes guys just on the field, they take their game up a notch, or so there's just something that, like, maybe at practice you're not seeing, and when the lights are on and the lights are the brightest, something comes out of them. But this is a chance for a lot of guys to prove, like, hey, I can do this at this stage. I can play in an actual NFL game setting and make an impact. And the moment's not too big for me. It's not just practice tape. It's actually game tape now, and put those things out there to be evaluated by the team as they sort through this 53-man roster. And so there's a couple guys that I want to get to on this list after Shedeur in terms of guys that have the most to gain in Friday night's preseason game. And I'll stay on the offensive side of the ball for this first one, because I do think Jamari Thrash is a guy who can gain a lot from this game against the Panthers. Jamari has had a really, really solid camp. There's been a number of highlight-worthy plays for him. Last year, the drops were really an issue for him. And I see a concerted effort to be better about catching the football, not having those drop issues, making the plays that need to be made when he's open and available and the ball comes his way. And he's been really good at that. He's made improvements in that regard, and he has become sort of a highlight reel throughout camp that's been worthy of paying attention to. So I think Jamari Thrash has to be on this list. And for him, it really does come down to the thing I alluded to sort of in the opening of this conversation. What he's showing us at practice is great. Can he translate it to a football field in a game setting? That's what I'm looking for from Jamari Thrash. In a wide receiver room that just does not have a lot of experience, that is looking for other players to step up and be able to make plays and be involved in this offense as a weapon. If he can show you some things this preseason, I think it'll go a long way in terms of him being an important piece in this offense just in general. When the regular season finally rolls around, they're looking for playmakers in that position group specifically. And so getting Jamari, to be able to sort of meet the moment there and take that next step would be massive, because I don't know, there's a lot of guys that we have confidence in right now in that group. And, him coming along maybe faster or unexpectedly would be a step in the right direction for an inexperienced group overall that needs more playmakers like Jamari Thrash to make plays, and he's been sort of primarily in that slot role. So interested to see what that kind of looks like for him in whatever amount of reps he gets coming down the pike here on Friday night. I'm going to go to the defensive side for this next one because Julian Okwara has done some nice things at camp. Very deep defensive line group, and I've talked about that already. There's only going to be so many spots available. But listen, when you get down to brass tacks of trying to sort out that unit specifically and who's going to make the roster and who's not, Julian Okwara could maybe make the conversation more difficult where they decide we need to keep this guy around if he continues to do what he's doing, and he does it in settings like this. Now, I think Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire pretty much locks to make this team, barring injury. I think Myles Garrett, obviously, without question, is a lock to make this team. We know, we understand that. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who they added this offseason, I think he's kind of the replacement to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, or sorry, not Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Obo Okoronkwo, excuse me. And I think he's shown some things. He's maybe been less noticeable at practice, though, and maybe that's where somebody like Julian Okwara slides in if he has some really nice preseason games and put some good tape out there. Maybe he supplants Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, or maybe they both make this team and you keep 5 defensive ends and only 4 defensive tackles, and you keep a larger group of defensive linemen in general up to 9, and you're kind of on you ride into the season with that as your group. And that might mean Juwan Briggs or Sam Kamara doesn't make this team maybe as a defensive tackle guy. So there's some things that have to obviously play out there and sort it, and there's some things to be sorted out there. But I thought it was interesting that Jim Schwartz actually mentioned Julian in a question I asked him earlier this week, just about like the competition for that defensive end spot opposite of Myles Garrett. And he went really deep into how other guys have stood out. And I think Julian Okwara has been noticeable where he's trying to sort of vie for a roster spot, make a name for himself. And it'd be interesting to see what he does in a preseason game against another team, if he can sort of continue to replicate that. I'll go back to the offense for this next one. And I think the running back room in general is just intriguing. While we wait for Quinshon Judkins to arrive, it's the assumption is that Jerome Ford is sort of that first guy up in that group. He's the sort of established starter of the elder statesman of the group. We know what he can do. We've seen him in this offense already, and I imagine going back to a Kevin Stefanski-based system, he has a chance to maybe thrive in it and do some nice things. And I'm not denying that he probably is sort of running back one in this group in general right now. But Dylan Sampson was brought in, yes, drafted after Quinshon Judkins, but brought in with a lot of expectations of his own and was expected to play a major role in this offense in general as kind of your third down back, your pass catching back out of the backfield. And the Browns want to utilize him in that way. But listen, if he has a great preseason, maybe he proves that he's worthy of more right out of the jump here, and that he can maybe be the lead back in this group with Jerome Ford maybe sharing reps with him, but him being the first man up. So seeing what he kind of brings to the table, seeing if he can sort of establish himself as the guy that should be the workhorse of the group, especially while Quinshon isn't out there, could go a long way. And if he shows out in a preseason game setting like this, he certainly has a chance to maybe do that and change some minds about what that room might need to look like come week 1. And then the last one I'll give you is just undrafted rookie wide receiver Luke Floria. Floria has had a really brilliant training camp to this point, making plays every single day. Him and Shedeur Sanders have been great together. So watching them with this offense in a game is going to be interesting. You could also maybe throw Gage Larvadain into the mix here for this last spot. It's kind of like a pick your poison thing. But I think Luke Flory, because he's undersized, is probably a guy that ends up as a practice squad player. But if he makes it undeniable, where he's like, listen, look what I'm doing at practice. Look what I'm doing in preseason games. Maybe he forces the issue and earns himself a roster spot. And so he could do himself even more favors than he already has by balling on a preseason game like this to maybe actually end up being on the 53-man roster instead of just the practice squad when it's all said and done. Along the lines of players that have the most to gain from Friday night, I also have some key things that I'll be watching for tonight. I'll give those to you coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Ever wish managing your money just felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Monarch Money, my wife and I, have been trying to get some bigger projects done around the house. We just had our windows done. Plus, it's the summer. We wanted to take a trip or two. And there was no better way to find out what our financial picture looked like so we could financially plan for those things that we wanted to do. Monarch Money made managing our money together as a couple smoother than ever before. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is just around the corner, and that means fantasy football is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with the fantasy football experience like never before. My most competitive league is in Yahoo Fantasy. I'll tell you that right now. It's the most fun I have playing fantasy. My friends and I are playing Yahoo Fantasy and having a good time doing it. You should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran joining your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's just one team left standing. This season, with the season just around the corner, now is the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still stick to the head-to-head private leagues or join a public league as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. So on top of players that have a lot to gain from Friday night, there are also a number of interesting storylines or things that are worth paying attention to in this matchup with the Carolina Panthers. First preseason game, of course, for the Browns so far this month and leading up to the season. And I think there's some obvious ones and some less obvious ones. But we'll get into these here real quick and sort of rattle them off. And I think the first thing is obviously how many starters actually play. As I talked about on yesterday's show, I think it is pivotal that Kevin Stefanski takes a bit of a different approach to this preseason in general. Clearly, he's not playing a lot of these guys or planning on playing a lot of these guys on Friday night. I understand why. They just had the joint practice. They put more value in those than they do even the preseason games. But, whoever is out there, and if it's a larger group than even last year, I think that matters. And I think that sort of gives you get some guys ready for the season. And in the vein of doing things differently at camp this year, where you have a more physical style camp and you're actually tackling and taking guys to the ground and the intensity has been turned up a notch and we've been visibly able to see that. I think it's valuable that you also sort of let that carry over into the preseason and you get some of these games where guys are really, you get some of these games where guys are actually playing and getting themselves prepared for the hits and the grind and the feel of an NFL game and an NFL season. And frankly, in some respects, like with how bad last season started, being able to hit the ground running is an important thing. You do that, or you can accomplish that sooner once the regular season gets here by being more up to speed, being more locked in, getting a lot of these pre-snap penalties and things out of your system now. That's what the preseason is good for and helpful with. So I do think more of them need to play than maybe what Kevin Stefanski is doing in this first game. But we'll see if by week 3 of the preseason, he has a plan for those starters to take some valuable reps and get out there and actually play. And if that's part of the game plan. But how many starters actually play, how many guys are sort of using this as an opportunity to tune up for the season, I think would be interesting. And obviously you want to keep those guys as safe as possible so they don't get hurt. But I do think keeping an eye on that will be something we're all paying attention to. The usage of 12 personnel will be another thing that I'm paying attention to. And kind of off of that, a spin off of that, is also just kind of how much motion we see. I noticed something the other day at practice where I was like, last year, this team had talked about leading up to the season, utilizing motion more to help with pre-snap diagnosis of what defenses were trying to do against you and all these different things. And then you got to the regular season and it was like non-existent. And I don't know if it was strictly just because, well, they couldn't get the offense off the ground in a way, like they couldn't even really get out of their own way with pre-snap penalties and stuff and illegal formations, that they just decided maybe we're not going to do this anymore and we're just going to stick with sort of the basics here because we can't seem to execute this right. And so they just didn't end up using as much motion, but there was like all this talk about using more of it. And so I'm interested to see if that's a part of or a staple of what they do and they sort of unveil in this preseason matchup. If you start to see that motion be more prominent and what that sort of means for the offense as a whole. But off of that, the 12 personnel piece of this is also important because how many tight ends are they going to keep? Are they going to keep more than 3? They could because they're going to be using a lot more of them. I think 3 is probably the soft spot, but you maybe see more. Harold Fannin is likely to play in this game. I'm assuming David Njoku won't, but I think Harold Fannin will. What does he sort of bring to the table? How does he sort of continue to build upon what I think has been a solid couple weeks here for him? The first week, I think he got off to a slow start. He did have a couple drops since then, but I think this last week has been really, really strong from him. So what does he sort of look like out there in this offense? And maybe as a slot guy or just playing different areas of the field? I'm curious about that. But yes, the usage of 12 personnel, we know it's going to be brought back in a higher rate, and starting to see some of the concepts and things off of or out of 12 personnel will be worth noting. Going back to what I talked about with Jamari Thrash and even Luke Floria to a degree, can any of these down the depth chart wide receivers step up and look like players that are going to be ready to contribute this year? We know wide receivers are a weak spot for this team. We know they have some issues there. We know that there is not a lot to be desired when it comes to this wide receiver room after Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman still has a lot to prove. Jamari Thrash, as we already talked about, is a guy who is trying to sort of find his own footing in the NFL and carve out a nice role for himself. And we know Deontay Johnson's proven some things. Can he stay focused? Right now, I think he's had a brilliant camp and he looks really strong. He'll probably be out there as well. But seeing him do it in a game setting is key. And seeing other guys down the depth chart do it in a game setting like this is key, because after Deontay Johnson, again, like Jamari Thrash, can he be a contributing piece this year? Are there other guys that maybe Gage Larvadane, like, is that going to carry over to a game setting? Are there other receivers that maybe we're sleeping on? Caden Davis, for example, like, are guys going to step up in these games? DeAndre Carter, what can he do as a wide receiver? We know he's here primarily to probably be a returner, but can he also be a focal point or an important, maybe not even a focal point is the wrong phrase, but can he be a contributor to this offense in a way as well? Those are all things that I think are valuable as far as that wide receiver room is concerned. I got a lot of notes just in general about that group that I'm going to be sort of paying attention to throughout the preseason and trying to learn more about where that group kind of stands before the regular season kicks off. And then just in general, the rookies' performances translating to a game, as I've said numerous times. I mentioned Harold Fannin Jr. in this segment already, but there's others as well. Carson Schlesinger has been incredible at camp so far. Let's see it out on the field in a preseason game. What does that look like? Does it translate? Can he keep that momentum going? I'm assuming Mason Graham will be a starter that plays, get him some early reps here, even as the number 5 overall pick. Does he look like he's dominating, especially knowing that's going to be at least one guy for the Browns, again, assuming he plays, which I think he will, that goes up against the ones for the Panthers. And is he causing problems already, just kind of out there by himself without Myles Garrett sort of flanking him and some of these other veterans flanking him? And if he is, like, man, watch out. And then I mentioned Dylan Sampson as well in the first segment, but what does he look like from a running back standpoint? Can he maybe establish himself as the guy that should be the lead horse of this group beyond or instead of Jerome Ford while they wait for the Quinshon Judkins legal situation to play out? We will see. And obviously Shedeur, that's the big one everyone's going to be paying attention to the most, is what does he do when he's out there? And what does he sort of look like, playing primarily with the backups against some of the Panthers first team guys, though. and what does he sort of show or flash on a stage like this and in a moment like this. So those are some of the key things that I'll be paying attention to. I mentioned the Quinshon Judkins situation and that who maybe emerges from the running back group while he's absent, but we have I think I would call it a minor development in the Quinshon Judkins case and where things stand. We'll talk about it. I'll give you some of the details coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need an extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I can tell you some of my favorite memories of golfing came with my dad, playing as part of an annual round we'd get together for a Father's Day tradition many years ago. It's been a while since we last played, but I can tell you, I've hit some of the best shots of my life, played some of the best rounds of my life with my dad. I only wish I would have had more great shots or maybe beat him a few more times. Maybe I would have if I had been drinking this 5-Hour Energy Transfusion flavor. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive $20 off your first order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. All right, so as I said, the Quinshon Judkins situation continues to be largely a waiting game. That is still the case with this update that I have for you. But I noticed within the public files that are on record that Quinshon Judkins, with his lawyer, his attorneys, waives his right to a speedy trial. And so, listen, off rip here, I'm going to be very clear. I am not a lawyer. I try my damnedest to get more and more versed in legal jargon and what some of these things mean every single year, because the lines between covering a football team and law, things that happen within the law or legal situations that we need information on become more and more blurred year over year as these things happen. And the Browns seem to be obviously a team that has a lot of these things happen. So we're constantly trying to sort of cross over into a different world that I'm not as versed in as I wish that I was. So I want to make that clear off the rip. But essentially, what waiving his right to a speedy trial does is it wipes out, according to the documents, the need for him to be tried within a certain window of time, or the need for, like the document itself says, it waives the requirement of the state to file formal charges within 60 days. That's the first thing it says. The second line on the document says that it also waives the requirement for the case to be heard within 175 days from the date of formal charges being filed, which is interesting because that is the timeline for a felony to be brought to trial is 175 days. The timeline for a misdemeanor, which is what this is being called right now, a misdemeanor 1, to be brought to trial after charges are filed is 90 days. But this kind of wipes all that out, takes it out of the equation and says, we don't need to rush this thing. We're taking our time here. And there's a couple different reasons why somebody would waive the right to do this based on my basic understanding of it. There's certain things that this could sort of mean here, but note those dates, note those sort of things. It used to be in Florida that you had to be tried within a certain amount of time of being arrested, but that's now been changed as of July 1st, where it's now based off of the day that formal charges are filed. And there have been no charges filed to this point in this case by the state. That's a key part of this, and a key reason why potentially you would waive the rights to a speedy trial, which I'll get to here coming up. So the reasons this might be happening. The main thing is it prolongs the process for the case going to trial, which could be about trying to kick the can down the line until after the season. That was kind of my first read on it, was like, okay, they're going to give this some time to sort itself out, gather evidence, etc., build their defense, which I've sort of read is the simple answer is that sometimes the defense just in general waives the right to a speedy trial because they want more information. They want to put together a thorough case to help their client avoid any jail time or a guilty charge or anything like that. And so, or a guilty verdict rather. And so sometimes it's just the defense doing it to gather more information to make sure their case is rock solid. But kicking the can down the line to me sort of said, okay, maybe they're trying to push this till after the season, try to play out his rookie year, and then worry about it. Which, by the way, there is a little bit of precedent for this, because if that was the way it played out, yes, the first assumption would be, well, he go on the commissioner's exempt list. But what's interesting is, like this past year, for example, Rashee Rice had charges brought against him. No trial had been gone through. There was no conclusion. And the NFL generally likes to wait for a conclusion to any legal proceedings before handing out a suspension. And so they could put him on the commissioner's exempt list, but that would mean he basically misses the entire season. And I don't think there's any precedent for like basically suspending a guy for a whole season without any charges actually being like brought against you or a case being resolved. And so I wondered if that was how this would go down, if he would get to play out his rookie season, get his contract situation figured out, and then worry about the trial in the offseason. And that would then maybe trigger a suspension in 2026. But I also think, again, and this goes back to where there's no formal charges filed at this point. Giving away the right to a speedy trial could also, and this seems to me, this probably seems like the most likely thing that's happening. It may also just be about continuing conversations on a settlement. Like if part of the settlement is a diversion program or some sort of classes that he would have to go to, or community service, it gives the court time to make sure, okay, we're going to settle this and give you, and tell you to fulfill these things that you need to fulfill. But we have a window now where we can bring charges back to the table later if you don't fulfill these things that are part of the settlement that we are coming to terms on. And so that sort of feels like the direction this could be heading. It doesn't necessarily mean anything is imminent at this time, but it does mean that we could see some movement here soon. And it continues to be a waiting game at this point. But this is the first update that we've had in a while on this case. There really wasn't anything in his documents since like mid-July. And so this is the first sort of update we've gotten where it feels like, okay, could be in line for something to start sort of happening here. And it could be in the form of a settlement happening behind closed doors, that they waived this right to allow the court the leeway they need to ensure, like, okay, if we're going to settle this, we want to know that you're going to fulfill all these things, give you time to do that, or else the charges will be filed. And so I think that's kind of what could be happening behind the scenes here. Again, speculation on my end. I am not reporting this as like fact that there's a settlement being made in the works, but the sense that I get from, first of all, reading other things from people way smarter than me who know the law even better and work in that field and have seen the precedent or understand how these things tend to work or why they're executed. It feels like that is potentially what is going to happen here. But there's obviously some other reasons why it could have been used as well. And we have to just kind of wait and see what the next steps are for Quinshon, his legal team, and this trial in general. But wanted to give you that update. I think it's an important one because at this point, the Browns are waiting for Quinshon Judkins to even be signed. I know fans are waiting for Quinshon Judkins to even be signed and brought into the building in some capacity. And the wait goes on because we still don't know exactly what's going to happen with this, but a settlement does, at least at this point, feel like it could be likely here. And that might mean he avoids any serious legal charges. And then it would just come down to what the league does in terms of their personal conduct policy, suspension. Does he get the standard 6 games, all those different things, which again is stuff that is to be determined at this point. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Make sure you come hang out after the preseason game on Friday night. Hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. We'll have another episode for you after the game tonight, so be sure to tune in for that. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Bets, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. You can also keep it local, as I always like to remind you. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. Talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.